with some amazing...
Hey, this is Walter Jones.
This is Austin St. John.
And you're listening to
Ranger Danger.
Go, go, Ranger Danger. Matt and Michael's Ranger Danger.
Welcome once again to Ranger Danger Boom Room. This is the podcast where we talk about the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers comic coming from Boom Studios. This episode, it will be issue number 4, and we are once again welcoming back Mr. Kyle Higgins. Welcome back, Kyle.
Hey, thanks. It is always pleasant to be here in the Boom Room.
Pleasant to have you in the Boom Room, Mr. Higgins.
We should have an actual room.
Why?
I don't know.
Where all the boom happens?
Yeah, you got to keep the boom in the room.
Yeah.
Otherwise, there's no point having a room. It's just a boom space.
I'm sorry.
It sounds like a shitty '90s song, or like early 2000s.
I'm sure there was like a Venga Boys or something.
That's. I was just thinking that Venga Boys. Yes.
Yeah.
Circa like 2000 and 2000.
I think we can all agree that that's the true inspiration for this podcast.
Yeah. For everything I do, really.
Yeah, the values and themes espoused by that song is where we draw our inspiration. Enough about the Venga Boys. We should instead talk about issue number 4. Now, should we just talk about the issue overall first before we sort of get into the specifics, maybe? How are you feeling about things so far? How the series is going?
Pretty good.
Yeah.
I think sales are strong. People seem to dig the book. I'm having fun.
That's important.
Henry just had a kid.
Oh wow!
So he hasn't told me that, by the way. My editors told me, like, did you know Henry had a kid? I said no, I had no idea. So he's a new dad, which makes the timing perfect for the upcoming issue 5, where Tony Silas is coming in to do the Zach one shot.
Yeah, give Henry a small break to tend to his child.
Yeah, and get ahead on issue 6 and 6 through 9.
Yeah.
The schedule on this first arc was a little brutal because we burned a lot of our lead time up front, and that came out of just kind of the usual progress of trying to get a book off the ground, and Saban is still learning how to do this on a monthly basis and everything, and now we're kind of firing on all cylinders. And
found your rhythm a bit.
Right now I just looked through the proof for issue 5, and Hendry's working on issue 6, and I'm doing lettering on that and everything. And I've noticed kind of a pattern that I fall into when I start a new book, where the early issues, when I look back, Batman Beyond was the first time I kind of noticed this, like a few years ago, where the early issues they feel, I'm proud of them, and I think they turn out well, but they feel a little stiff. And everything from, in some cases overwriting to, too many panels per page, or too many sound effects, and everything feels very meticulously kind of placed in a way that doesn't have quite the amount, the right kind of intangibles, like the right kind of flow. And it's a subtle thing, and most people probably would never pick up on something like that, or at least that's how I have to tell myself to not go crazy. But as I get into a book, a few issues in, I feel like I kind of loosen up my grip on certain things in a way that allows a little bit more freedom and a little bit more just kind of a better flow.
Yeah.
And so, like, looking at issue 5, I think it flows really, really well. I think issue 6, the amount of dialogue and the amount of kind of panels per page, it's working really well. And so I'm really excited. I think issue 4 is pretty awesome, but it's definitely a dense issue because we had to pack a ton in.
There's certainly a lot going on in this one, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it would have been nice to have a few more pages just to kind of open things up a bit with some splashes or double page spreads for the action. But it is what it is, and I'm really excited getting into the second arc now. So
that is exciting.
So let's before we get started, let's talk about that a little. You've talked in past episodes about not really, like, this issue isn't the end of the first arc, in that we're still very much in the middle of the story and everything's still going on. But would it be fair to say that this is kind of the end of the first act of that first big story?
Yeah, that's a great way of describing it. It's the end of the first story arc, because that's how the trade paperback will collect it.
Yep.
But the first kind of arc is really like the first 8 to 12 issues is kind of like, I think in terms of like year arcs. So this is definitely the first big kind of game-changing moment that spins into what the next 4 issues are going to be after issue 5. And then that will have a big game-changing moment that will spin into the next 4 issues, and by the end of that, our characters are going to be in a different place from where they started, and that will be the end of kind of the first big. That'll be the end of the mega arc, I guess you could designate it as.
Yeah. Well, I think that's probably a good segue to start talking about the issue specifically. So if you haven't, listeners, read the issue yet, then...
What's wrong with you?
Yeah, first of all, what's wrong with you? Second of all, stop right now, go get it. You can get it from Comixology or probably from your local comics retailer.
Yep.
Read it, then come back and join us, because we're going to break this thing down bit by bit. And it starts off on the first page, just in case you've forgotten, with the dragons all tearing out of the ocean and attacking an ocean liner. And wow, does Henry do a great Godzilla? Because that last panel of him stalking towards the city is great.
Yeah, it's only made better by Matt on the colors as well.
Yeah.
And that's something that people probably don't think about a lot, but a colorist on a book like this, and I see every step of the art process. So, I know what Matt brings to the table, but if Henry weren't colored right, the book would not look nearly as good as it does.
Yeah.
And especially on something like this where, we were running a bit hot on some of our deadlines just because of, like I was saying before, like getting something like this up and running. We ate a lot of our lead time up front. And so, I feel that as a writer a bit. Henry definitely feels it as the artist. Mm-hmm. But lettering and color feel that more than anyone because they're at the end of the pipeline.
Yeah.
And so for Matt to turn in the type of work that he's been turning in under the type of deadline crunch that he's been under is kind of it's a minor miracle. And so we're incredibly fortunate to have him and to have a book that looks as good as it does. So yeah, Dragon Sword destroying ocean liners.
Speaking of the colors,
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I was going to say, speaking about the colors, you can see it in the purple of the ocean here, and I think for some reason it's that little detail that really sets off that last panel because it gives you that feel of like it really is in the dead of night, and this is a real situation.
Right.
Yeah, that's awesome.
I was just going to say that it's always walking that kind of fine line, kind of threading that needle about how much destruction we can really have, and people can't really die, sort of thing. So
we've got
it's
life jackets there; they're fine.
Exactly, there's life jackets, and it's in the middle of the ocean. But yeah, at least they're floating.
They're probably going to be fine. For all we know, no one died.
Not if I had my way.
So Scorpion is back in the pilot seat as well, and it's interesting seeing her take such a pivotal role.
Yeah, I like it. It's good.
It is cool. And then we jump in page 2 to the command center, where they have to respond quickly to this disaster. And I think maybe it's what you were saying earlier about sort of finding your groove with the series, but the characterizations of the characters coming through in such small periods of time, I think, is really well done in this scene. Jason in particular really feels like he's that right balance between just a really good guy and the right leader for the team, but also not perfect either, if that makes sense.
The one that's been really working for me, I had the opportunity to see Jason David Frank at a convention in Sydney last weekend or the weekend before, And I rereading this issue with all of like his line readings in my head, really like it really feels like Tommy. And I think it's an impressive bit of work because those are not particularly well defined characters historically in the show.
Yeah.
But I really am feeling I get who those guys are, I think.
Yeah.
Well, that's awesome. I think, I think I'd be lying if I didn't say I have those actors kind of voices in my head a lot of times.
Sure.
But I don't know. I mean, I'll write lines once in a while and I'll go, would they say that, or could I actually hear them say that? And I can't. But I still know it's like, no, this feels right. And so it's kind of I don't know. It's a fine line to walk where you want to write it so it feels reminiscent of the original show, but the quickest way to kind of lose your mojo is to try to make it the old show, or try to make it sound like the old show, because and then it just sounds like it becomes parody.
Absolutely.
I think we finally worked in some alpha IIIs in issue 5, but I kind of fought it for a little while. Just because the second you start doing III, where's the line? Are you doing it on every line? Are you doing it? How much of it then becomes a pastiche? So nods to the original show. Things that feel tonally kind of not even tonally, but things that feel kind of similar or reminiscent of, I think are good. An homage to. But I try to push things forward with some of the language from these characters so that it doesn't just it doesn't just read as kind of like a strict retreading. I mean, sometimes I'll write lines for a character and then I'll give them to a different character, just because I think it's like, it would actually be more interesting to hear this person say that, and I'll reword things once in a while if it feels a little too out of that character's wheelhouse. But yeah, I mean, these are the struggles that you have writing an ensemble book like this.
I think this page in particular, having to get across so much information so rapidly, I found it really interesting that you're able to, because it's a 7-panel page with a lot of dialogue, but it also
it's a dense page. It's a dense page,
but it also doesn't feel like it's a slog. Like, it's so natural and fast moving.
And I have to say before we move on, I think based on the last 3 or 4 pages of this issue, I don't think anyone's going to be able to accuse you of being too much like the original show. Because I get the feelings that some stuff is about to shake up a little.
Yeah, I think that's a good assessment.
But let's get to that in a sec.
Yeah.
So this next page is really interesting to me because, I mean, like, functionally, nothing really happens other than the Rangers morph and summon their Zords.
Right.
But was it important to you to give that its own page to make it like a separation between the previous stuff and the next stuff?
Why did I do that? It was more of, I don't know, it was kind of just, it was a kind of an instincts thing, just kind of a gut feel. Certainly there have been moments in the series where the Rangers just show up.
Yep.
You don't see them morph. There have been moments where you see them morph from the point of view of a character standing there, i.e. Scorpina in issue 2. I was actually very clear about that. I didn't want to do an elaborate morph sequence. I wanted to see what it would look like if you were standing there watching it, Yep. And then there were moments in the hallucination stuff in issue 3 where you see kind of a variation on the traditional kind of morph moment. Henry did a killer job with like Tommy and Trini morphing, and like they're overtaken by energy within their morpher image. Like it's really sharp if you go back and look at it. And then in this issue, it just felt right. We're going into the big kind of climactic battle of, again, the first, I say arc, but it's really the first kind of, the break for the trade paperback. And it just kind of felt right to do like a big full Ranger morph shot. And the only other time I did it was in issue 0. So I don't know. I can't really explain why, other than it just kind of felt right. And then the bottom of the page, I knew I wanted to do little snippets of the Zords kind of waking up. That was the other big thing.
It sells something that takes about 2 minutes of screen time in the show, in just a look in the eyes of the Zords.
Yeah, this shit's about to get real.
Yeah, it's great. And what I quite like about the more traditional morph up top is that it kind of sets up your expectation that the Rangers are in their prime, they've got this handled, they're going to be fine, which makes what happens at the end of the issue more of a gut punch, I think.
Yeah.
Because they're not actually as together and capable as you sort of get the feeling they are from this scene.
Yeah, there's a version of that story where they just beat Scorpina and the issue ends, and then we go to the next thing.
Yes.
And instead something huge and catastrophic happens.
Yeah.
Right.
So, moving on a little bit. So we have the Dragon Zord now attacking the city.
I have a question.
Yep.
This is specifically set in San Francisco. We've got a little Fisherman's Wharf sign. Conscious decision to go outside Angel Grove?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I've said this before or described it in the book before, but my thinking is that Angel Grove is like Berkeley. Like, that's kind of how where I've been placing Angel Grove. That actually, I just realized as I said it, probably means nothing to you guys, does
I
it?
was just about to ask, to be honest.
I am Googling.
So Berkeley is an area of the San Francisco Bay, of the Bay Area, it's across the bay from San Francisco.
Oh, okay.
And it's right next to Oakland as well. So it's got skyscraper access, like nearby, very nearby. It's a really interesting coastline as far as the bay, which then goes out into the Pacific Ocean. And it would definitely be a place where there's water very nearby that the Dragon Zord could come from. Because really, to this point, the only Zord we have actually seen come out of its kind of holding location is the Dragon Zord.
Absolutely.
And that's on purpose, actually, because I'm still figuring out how the Zords are working as far as how they get where I need them to be. Inside baseball a little bit here, but if you notice, like the Zords, there are no traveling shots of the Zords yet. They just kind of are wherever we need them. They're just there.
Absolutely.
And part of that is because I need to actually firm up with, Boom and Saban, how that actually works and what we're going to be allowed to do and that sort of thing. But the Dragon Zord is easy because it comes out of the ocean. Like, that's the cool part of the Dragon Zord, and it could be done without destroying entire world economies. So it was important to me that it be in a location off of water that it could come from. It would also be interesting, and I don't know. I just think that, like, I live down in Los Angeles, and I went to school in Orange County, and so I know a lot of those kind of areas where the original show was, kind of set, and I don't know. Those towns are so, in a lot of ways, just generic to me, and that was kind of the point with how they shot it on the original show, and I just felt like, doing something in a place that a version of Angel Grove that felt a little bit more specific and unique would be kind of a more interesting take. So I don't know that, again, I don't know that I'm going to actually say that in the book, that it's near or next to Berkeley or something like that, but that's, in my mind, that's kind of where I place it.
I think even just placing it in real world locations like that gives it a sense of, place, I guess, that the show never had. It always felt like it was in generic world. Whereas if these guys are the people who defend the world, then monsters are going to show up in places that aren't right outside their doorstep all the time.
Well, just wait till issue 5. I'm not going to spoil it for you, but like there's a big sequence. The opening of the book is not only is it not in the U.S. or in Angel Grove, it's not in the U.S.
Yeah,
That's exciting.
Yeah.
All right, so the Dragon Sword destroys, I guess, an abandoned building.
Yes, that is very point. It was very important that it be an abandoned building. Yes.
Yes, no one gets hurt.
I love in the last panel of that page there, the kind of the Dragonzord reacts in a way that it is surprised by being chained up by the foot. And I love the way that it has different screeches for different situations.
Yeah.
It's kind of like confused and agitated screeches. Yeah.
Yes.
I enjoy that.
Good. That was something I gave a little thought to.
And then on the next page, the rest of the Zords show up and shit starts to get real.
Yeah.
I have a question. I don't remember having ever seen the Triceratops used either an underwater mode or this chain setup that you've got going.
It uses the chains.
Has it used the chains once?
Yeah, from its horns. I think.
The chain, the horn chains. I feel like I did see before.
Sure.
But the idea of an underwater mode was new, and originally, actually, what I wrote was all the Zords going into an underwater mode, and in the original outline, there's going to be this huge battle between the Zords and the shark monsters, and it was all going to be underwater.
Wow.
And I changed it because it just, as I got into it, the point of the script needed to be about the Dragon Zord destroying parts of a city to charge the crystal with the green chaos energy, and I just couldn't find a way to make all those play nice together.
Yeah.
And so it turned into more of an above the surface kind of battle, but I still wanted to keep the idea of an underwater, like a Zord going into underwater mode, and or at least a Zord, just like jetting into the water to pull the Dragon Zord out to sea. And it was like something we needed to call out, like that there's an underwater mode, so that's how the page happened.
It makes sense. It makes the Zords feel like they're a lot more useful.
Versatile?
Yeah, they're not going to get hung up on, there's a boulder in my way, I'm going to have to stop now. Or, there's the ocean, I guess that's where our usefulness ends. So yeah, that's really cool.
I've never actually asked Hendry about this, but I need to at some point. I keep meaning to. But the design of the Zords, particularly the T-Rex and the Dragon Zord, they have such skimpy arms that I've always wondered, like when you watch the show, it's super impractical. Like those Zords can't throw punches, like the arms are just kind of there. So they tail swipe all the time. But I've asked for certain things in battles, and I always wonder, it's like, how is he going to do this? And I can see him trying to figure it out, and he gets around certain kind of deficiencies in the Zord just by the way he stages things for the single frame imagery that we're working with.
Yep.
But I need to ask him at some point, like, has this been like a hang up at all? Like the idea of like, how the hell do I draw the Triceratops, like punching the Dragon Zord? Like, because their arms can't actually reach that far,
They seem to be maybe subtly organic. Like the way that the Tyrannosaurus Zord is sort of crouched over in the water in that scene is something that I don't think that Zord on the show could ever do just logistically.
Oh, definitely not. And that's kind of what I'm talking about. Yeah.
It's very impressive.
Right, so we've meanwhile on the moon.
Favorite phrase?
Yes. Yes.
There's a couple of really interesting things about this segment. Specifically, I guess, the interaction between how Rita sends the shark monsters, I guess. She doesn't like magically teleport them down and then throw her staff to make them grow.
Right.
There's, I guess, like a portal situation happening and something opening above the sky with the lightning shooting down.
Right.
Is that I guess it's obviously a conscious decision, but is that you going away from the throwing of the staff?
Yeah, I don't like the throwing of the staff.
I mean, how does it get back?
There's that. But I also, and maybe, I'm going to say this, and it would be very easy to argue with me and say, like, you're overthinking it, but that's kind of my job. I just can't get my head around the idea of throwing, I know she's a moon witch, but like throwing an object from the moon to Earth, and it either, like, I just can't get my head around it.
Yeah.
And it's such an inefficient way of doing business, so I don't know. I just kind of, it's like one of those things that, like, it's got charm from the original show, I know, but it's just not, it's not an element that I naturally gravitate towards.
I think one thing that struck me about it is that it's the source of her power in almost all situations. And the idea that she would throw that so far away from her when she's such a, like, defensive, evil creature. Like, I just can't see her letting go, literally, of herself like that. Yeah.
So my first, I'm trying to think, the first draft of this issue that I wrote, she actually takes the clay creature. I went even further. She took the clay creatures out of Finster's hands, and she pushed the clay creatures into her orb. Oh. And so I was essentially saying that the orb was like, is a medium, that she could send things almost like a teleporter, like a transporter, through the orb. And as we got into it, I don't remember if it was Boom or Saban or just a conversation with them, but we were talking about it, and it was like, well, there's the monster making machine, and we've seen, like, that's a thing, and I was like, yeah, I do like that. Like, I don't want to all of a sudden say, like, well, she's taking clay and putting it through the orb, and then how does the thing actually get created from the clay? Like, it was too many, it just wasn't clean enough for me. So we brought back the machine into the script, and then I kept the idea of, like, you turn the page and there's a big portal over the earth, or over the ocean, and lightning's coming down from it, because that was from the original script of, like, she pushes the clay things through the orb medium, and then you turn the page and there's the big hole in the sky as the things are falling out of them fully grown. So it turned into kind of like a combination of the two, which I think works really well.
So this next scene, I think, is the first real moment of drastic escalation, where a giant shark monster comes through, but it's the first of many. Rather than the Rangers dealing with a normal situation of just one monster, they've now got a dragon sword on their hands and multiple of these, like, just terrifying shark monsters to deal with.
So I guess I've got a question about the shark monsters.
Yes.
How much of that is described in the script, and how much of that are you saying, just give me some sort of shark monster, I don't really mind?
I described them as humanoid shark creatures, and I was kind of like, I was kind of picturing, like, street sharks from, like, the 90s. But I don't think I actually said street sharks. I just said, like, they're humanoid shark creatures, and I left that. That's all Hendry from there. I find this is something that I'm kind of continuously trying to push myself to get better at. Like, I think a lot of the fun with something like Power Rangers is building the crazy monster. If Matt Fraction were writing this book, like, there would be just the ideas behind the monsters would be super inventive and different and weird, and that stuff doesn't come naturally to me. So I think I tend to sometimes gravitate towards more things that are terrifying in their scale, or like more kaiju kind of based creatures, just because that's a more kind of grounded version. That's like what I'm able to get my head around. But I think there's definitely room to have more fun with some of the monsters and some of the mashups, and so the sharks were kind of the beginning of that for me. The monster that you're going to see in issue 5 is a continuation of that. And then there will be some monster stuff coming up in the second in the second kind of portion of the arc, 6 through 9, that I think will carry that even further.
Yeah, that's exciting. It's interesting because the show's take on monsters is so hard to replicate, I guess, because it is just properly insane. Like,
yes.
Sometimes it'll just be a brick wall with some faces on it for no reason.
It's often take two completely unrelated things.
Yes.
Like the pig monster who is dressed as a Roman centurion for no reason.
Yeah.
You know what? Until you've said that, I never put that together. But he is totally dressed as a Roman centurion.
Yeah, he really is.
We love us some pudgy pig. Or, the Halloween pumpkin who raps all the time.
Yeah.
And he's called Pumpkin Rapper because he's, naming wasn't necessarily their strong point.
It's not even like pumpkins rap things. So
No, there's not a pun there.
No, it's just complete non sequitur.
Well, my favorite as a kid was the turtle with the stoplight.
Oh man, we love
Shell Shock.
Shell Shock.
And that's a great name too.
Yeah.
But the fucking episode, isn't that the one where Baboon Squat take spare clay things and just mash them together?
Yep. He's got a
that's what I
pirate hook
love.
for a hand and a bazooka and a stoplight and a turtle and
the pirate hook on his hand and the cannon are completely unrelated to the stoplight that makes you either freeze in time or the green light which makes you run away uncontrollably.
Well, that's the crazy. That's the other thing for me is the insanity behind a lot of those original series monsters.
Yeah.
I don't know that. I mean, the types of drugs that I would have to find. It's just not efficient,
Yeah, you don't want to risk your health when coming up with Power Rangers monsters. It's not the right thing to sacrifice your health for. So this next page is, I think, the best example, perhaps, of this issue of the condensed and insane action that goes on, where the Zords are just wailing on each other while also having to deal with being just teared apart by these sharks. I get this is one of the ones where I imagine it would have had to be a hard call to put this all on one page, because I imagine a lot of this would have looked amazing as a splash.
Yeah. I mean, which page is that specifically?
So I think
it
is page. That's a good question, actually. Maybe 17.
no, that can't be the right number.
No, that can't be right.
The one that opens with "The Sharks will hold the Rangers off" is the one.
Oh. So it's after they've is it the page where Zach goes, "Whoa, what was that?" So is it after? Is it the same page as the portal, or is it the page after that?
Page after the portal.
Yeah, where it's the big shot at the top of the Dragon Zord getting free to head towards shore, and the Ranger Zords are all dealing with sharks. Yeah. That originally was it was a big double page thing, right. And I couldn't do it. And really, we haven't gotten there yet, but the emotional stakes of the final sequence were more important.
Absolutely.
And it's a catch-22, because we knew we wanted to end issue 4 the way it ended, but that then meant we had a finite amount of real estate to get there. And especially with where issue 3 ended, it's we got to do it all, and we got to do it all tight, and it's tough. It's tough to pull off.
Yeah.
And that's why you get a lot of 6 and 7 panel pages here, which is something I'm trying to avoid in the future. Of course, I say that, but then Tony Silas, who is one of my favorite people, and he's drawing issue 5 coming up here. Well, we did 40 issues of Batman Beyond together.
Yeah.
And Tony does this thing as we worked more and more on the book. He would start adding panels, And I was already on that book writing like 9-panel pages because it was a digital first book.
Yes.
So they would split the page in the middle, like horizontally.
Mm-hmm.
So you'd get the top half of the page would be one like iPad screen, and the bottom half of the page would be another iPad screen, and the whole book would be 10 pages total, which would break into 20 iPad screens.
Totally.
So I approached each page as 2 pages. So they would be dense, right? Because like it was first and foremost supposed to be a digital book, and then when it was collected in print, it just looked fucking insane because there were so many panels. So when Tony started adding pages, and we get up to like adding panels, and we get up to like 12 and 13 panel pages, it was like, dude, like you don't have to add that many panels. He's like, no, I like the reaction shots and this and that. So on this issue. And I should also mention, like, that's way more work for an artist, you know?
Absolutely.
And way more work for a colorist because you're having to do cuts on every panel is a different shot, so you have to render each one. And so on this, I messaged him ahead of time. I was like, dude, you're gonna be so excited. I'm giving you a bunch of like 3-panel pages, some splashes, like some bunch of 4-panel pages. And he's like, oh, I can't wait. And the layouts start coming back for issue 5. And all of a sudden there's like 7, 8 panels, 9 panels per page. And then he's adding stuff. And the storytelling choices he's making are great.
Yeah.
Like, I know why he's doing it. But it's just a funny kind of, like, it's the opposite of what I was, of me giving him a break, you know?
I feel like the only solution is to give him an issue that's 20 splash pages in a row, and then you'll eventually end up with...
I worked with an artist once. I did an issue of a book. It was Deathstroke number 3, and and the deadline was so tight, and Joe Bennett turned in... like the last 5 pages, he turned 3 of them into splash pages all in a row. And it kind of works, but but all of a sudden we got this art in of like 3 splash pages. Yeah, but
that's super weird pacing as well to end.
It's
on.
very weird pacing. Yeah,
it reminds. I've heard stories, particularly from the 90s, I think, of artists who just really wanted to sell their art at cons. So would take scripts and turn 9-panel pages into a big splash page of Spider-Man, because that'll sell for like $3,000, so fuck the scripts.
Well, I don't know. I mean, that doesn't happen. I mean, 9 panels to a splash would be like very drastic.
Yes,
but yeah, there's definitely an emphasis, I think, for a lot of artists, or not. I shouldn't overgeneralize like that, but definitely for some artists, like the secondary market is a huge, a huge part of their livelihood.
Absolutely.
And I've worked with artists before that they're asking me if I can front load action or back load action, because the way that the penciler splits up the pages with the inker would mean that the inker, in this particular case I'm thinking of, the inker would not get any of the action pages to sell.
Right.
And so he'd get all the talking pages, and that had happened a few issues in a row, and I was like, I didn't know that was a thing.
Yeah.
Like, that you guys split your original art.
That's fascinating.
Like, yeah, so like some artists work that way, some teams work that way, where they just say like, every issue I'll get the first 9 and you take the last 11 or something like that, and it's kind of just like luck of the draw, but I was like, oh wow, well I don't want to like cause anyone to lose out on
their livelihood.
But at the same time, it's like, well, what's best for the story? I'm sorry, but the action needs to be front loaded here, or back loaded, whatever the case may be. Yeah, but there are all sorts of these little kind of things about the comic industry that you don't really know until you start doing it.
Yeah, no, it's fascinating. So back to the issue. We're back at the command center with Tommy, and we finally get an answer, at least of sorts, as to what was going on with Rita in Tommy's head. And it basically seems like it was his own self-doubt kind of warped and fueled by the dragon powers. Was this where you're going all along with this?
Oh, yeah. No, this was definitely... That was the plan for me from the get-go. Like, it would be too easy for Rita to just to actually be interacting with him.
Yes.
I think it's far more interesting if this kind of spectral version of Rita is a manifestation of his own kind of trauma and doubt. This thread may not be fully wrapped up, though, is what I would say.
Yeah. What I found really interesting about it is that there's no one else to blame in this situation. He can't go back and be like, it's okay, guys, Rita did it, I'm fine. He still has to sort of grapple with that.
I think that's part of why he becomes, we're not there yet, but why he becomes as kind of defiant or as kind of cut and dry as he does towards the end of the issue, because he did succeed. He overcame several things, including Scorpina, but also himself.
Yeah. And
I think that's why I think that is a big component for the fuel that's a big part of what fuels him in the end of this issue. And I think, obviously, like I said, we're not there yet, but one of my favorite thing about that stuff and what I worked really hard on was I think everyone's right and everyone's wrong.
Yes, absolutely.
And that's tough to do, and I hope we pulled that off for the most part. I mean, it was something that I was very conscious of writing it. But anyway, so back to we'll get there. But yeah, Tommy and Rita.
Yeah. So after he sort of figures out what's going on and powers through it, he decides that he needs to get back out into the field and go against Jason's orders and morph and join the rest of the Rangers. And I found this so interesting, because I guess it goes back to what you were just saying about he's had this major victory, he's overcome his own self-doubt, but now his action is to go against what everyone else has been saying and defy everyone else. So it doesn't quite feel like the victory that I think maybe he thinks it is in his head.
Right.
Yeah. He gets back into the action. We see...
Before we get to that, there's one interesting line that I wanted to talk about where
Zordon
tells him, like, I'm not going to stop you from doing this, but Jason is in charge and you need to consider that.
Yeah.
I guess being the leader of the Power Rangers on the show, at least in the Mighty Morphin period, never really seemed to mean much. Like, he got the cool T-Rex and he got a sword, but outside that, he was really just one of them. Whereas this kind of really emphasizes the idea that Jason does get a say in being on, like, the leading side.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is that, like, you pushing the leader role specifically so that Tommy has someone to rebel against, or just for a team dynamic reason?
That's a great question. It's both. I mean, I think that one of the things that makes Jason so interesting to me is that the heavy is the head that wears the crown. And being the leader, being the one that people have to turn to and they look to, and it can be an unpopular position. It's also a position that a lot of people think they could do. Yeah. It's easy to second guess. That's a really tough spot to be in. And it takes a certain type of person to be able to handle that. And I think it's super easy to look at someone like Jason and say, well, they're boring as a character, right? Like, everything he has done to this point has been very kind of like, hey, we're gonna do this, you know, we'll find a way, you know. It's kind of, it's a little, I guess, cliched in some ways, or it's very kind of one-dimensional. I think as we get going further here and I spend more time with Jason, you'll start to see some of the aspects that I was just describing about what leadership really means and what being a leader really means. And part of that for me comes from, I make a living as a writer, but my my first love and my kind of true passion is directing. And it's tough. Like being on set with a 30-person crew and actors who a lot of times are smarter than you. And you're there and you're going into hour 15 on a night shoot and someone is questioning you and you don't have the answer because it's the second night of a night shoot and everyone's exhausted and the stunt people are over there and they're hourly and you're now going into overtime and the armorer is going to charge an extra, like it's a lot of pressure.
Yeah.
And if you're not decisive and if you're not in command, clearly people will turn on you.
Yes.
And you won't get the shot you need and you won't be able to service the story, which is your primary goal. Like, doesn't matter what an actor thinks. Well, I mean, it does, but it doesn't matter if it's not in service of the story.
Yep.
And I see that in Jason with regards to the Power Rangers and tactics that need to be taken and protocol that needs to be followed. Now, every good leader can recognize when they were wrong without coming off as being weak.
Yep.
And I think that is an aspect that's even harder to manage because now you're dealing with your own confidence, self-confidence, and being able to admit, you know what, I was wrong in this instance, you were right, or you guys were right, or I could have handled that differently. It doesn't make you necessarily weak if people believe in you. It makes you, I don't know, if you're smart, if people respect you, it makes you that much more, I don't even know the term, like I guess likable or relatable.
I guess no one can reasonably expect anyone to be right all the time. And I
Right.
think it's a weaker thing to do if you try and act like you're right all the time. So I think people will respect you if you come in with the best of intentions and tried to do the right thing. And
Now, exactly. Now take all that and funnel that through the lens of Jason, who is 16 years old, maybe 17.
yeah,
I don't care how wise you are at 16 or 17. There's shit you don't know.
Yeah.
There's experiences you don't have. And it doesn't matter if you've fought thousands of clay monsters and defeated a moon witch and saved the world 1,000 times over. There are interpersonal relationship skills that are not developed yet. It's just a fact of life. Mm-hmm. And I do think that there's a lot going on here as we're going to get into that stuff. I guess, we still aren't there yet. I keep thinking we're there.
That's okay.
There are a lot of interpersonal things going on here. Like I said before, everyone's right and everyone's wrong. And that's part of what being a teenager and also being a member of a team is. And the stuff that I haven't been able to do that much with Zordon yet, but I have in the back of my mind been trying to keep him as a character who is kind of, he is a mentor, but he's not an authoritative, if that makes sense. Like he's, you kind of called out that line where he says, I'm not going to stop you, or I can't stop you. I don't remember which it is.
I can't stop you.
I can't stop you, but you need to think hard about, what you're doing here. It's kind of like every parent letting their child go, step in a hole or fall on their face.
Yeah,
there are lessons to be learned there.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so I guess it's time for Tommy to go learn a lesson. So he
By jumping out of a plane.
Yeah.
Which is the best way to learn lessons.
Absolutely. So he actually starts by teleporting onto the head of the Dragon Zord, because obviously he can't teleport in, and tries to control it using his flute, only to get promptly thrown off by Scorpion just flicking the joystick and dumping him in the water. Which is kind of a great fall for him immediately after his great victory, like 2 pages ago.
Yeah.
Puts him in his place in a very literal sort of way. Kimberly catches him, though, and we see what is just an amazing action scene. I mean, like, very well conceived, and I think Henry pulls it off incredibly well as well, where he hitches a ride on the Pterodactyl Zord, and then just flying punches his way through the windscreen, I guess you'd call it, of the Dragon's Eye.
It's the eye.
It's the eye, yeah, which I guess serves as the windscreen.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, that's a moment that I wish we could have back. I wish I had more room for it, and it could have been a double-page spread. And we did like 3 versions on that angle too, and I think we had it in an earlier version, and for whatever reason we changed the angle, and it doesn't quite, like you just said, you weren't sure what it was, where he's punching through.
Yeah.
I think there's a better way that we could have executed it. I'm just being honest. Like,
yeah, absolutely.
I think what's there conveys the idea, but like a double page spread of him, if I had been able to find a way to open that up, double page spread of Tommy coming through a Dragon Zord eye, like, fuck yeah, man, like that would have been baller,
Yeah, no, I get that. I mean, I still think it was great.
Yeah, as someone who didn't see any of the other versions, I'm very happy with what I'm looking at right now.
Absolutely.
But I certainly understand that that's that thing that happens where you think, oh, maybe we should have kept it the way it was.
Yeah. Although then there was one version where he was coming through just based on notes, and it basically looked like he was kind of like floating Jesus coming like crotch first. And I'm glad we didn't keep that one.
I'm a little disappointed you didn't keep that one. That sounds great.
I think it's important for children and everybody to know that if you're going to break through a glass panel, don't try and do it with your crotch. That's not the way to lead.
We've always said that.
Yeah, that's a lesson that Zordon imparted in them very, very early on.
Yeah, after one unfortunate incident. It's like, okay, guys, we got to sit you down and talk this through with you.
Have you ever wondered what happened to the original Rangers? Now you know.
Oh god.
So that's issue 5, right? That just the scandalous revelation of issue 5. Yeah. So that's awesome. But and I don't know how intentional this is, but it reminds me of in Green with Evil when the Green Ranger first showed up. There's a bit where the Rangers are in the Megazord, and then the Green Ranger just breaks in the back door of the cockpit and sucker punches everyone in the back of the head. It's so good. And I saw some parallels here that I really enjoyed.
Yeah, I loved it because it was one of the few moments on the show that used the formula and then inverted it. Like, it shows the shots of the Megazord coming together and everything, and then they're in the cockpit and they're like, all right, power up. And then all of a sudden the door in the back just opens and this dude comes in and you're like, holy shit, I didn't know there was a door in the back. Exactly. Like, it's so cool. I love that shit, So this was definitely like, I don't know. It's just the idea of like the idea of someone like bursting through like a glass eye of a giant Dinozord is like, that's just, I mean, how do you not do that?
No, I'm with you. 100%.
Yeah, I mean, that's what definitely works for me, is that those cockpits on the show always feel like they could be anywhere, like they're just in a little magical box. But this really connects the inside of the Zords and the outside of the Zords. Yeah. Because you can literally just punch your way through if you try hard enough.
Yeah.
And it makes sense too that the eye is the weak spot of the creature. Like, it is actually where the people see out of. Yeah. But there's still giant sharks to deal with. So the Megazord gets out the power sword. Thank you, Michael.
One of several power swords.
Saving me there. And takes on the shark monsters while Tommy dukes out with Scorpina in the cockpit, which is a great. I love really, really close quarters fights.
Me too.
And I think that's a really awesome scene. Until Tommy shatters the dagger. Now, I wasn't sort of reading the panel quite right. How does he break the saber? Or the fake dragon dagger?
I'm pretty sure he just throws it against the wall.
Oh, I see. He grabs it and then throws. Yeah,
he's reaching out while they're fighting.
Yep.
And he chucks the bottle at the ground.
Yes.
Yeah.
So he does that, reclaims command of the Dragon Sword, and then we get a pretty great hero shot of the Megazord standing over the slain shark monster, which is awesome. Interesting that the shark monster doesn't blow up, but I think it sells this scene so much better that it's just kind of there bobbing at its feet in the water.
Yeah, it's actually still alive. He's keeping it He's bleeding it out.
Pinned it down with the sword.
God.
It'll blow up once all the blood is gone.
Oh yeah, that's a thought that's going to fester.
So, Saban is prepping their snipers as we speak.
There's no blood. They just have explosives in them, which is why they explode all the time.
I'm pretty confident Saban doesn't listen to the show. I think we're
no, man. The second you say that, that's fine.
Yeah.
No.
We've drawn them with our presence.
So now comes, obviously it's the nice, simple wrap up. Everything's good. The day is saved. There's nothing more to deal with.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a pretty apt description.
Yeah, everything's fine. Except there is a small argument, I guess, that breaks out.
And what is that argument about?
It's I guess,
everything?
Yeah, everything that's happened in the past 4 issues kind of coming to a head, where sort of Tommy's insecurities come up against Jason's insecurities as a leader, come up against Zach's insecurities, where we're not quite sure at this point where those are coming from.
Actually, issue 5 will probably illuminate some of that.
Yeah. And it's interesting because it seems left ambiguous, at least to me, as to whether or not this is a wholly organic falling out, or whether or not the chaos energy kind of contributed to this.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess we'll just leave that one open.
Yeah, no, that's...
But before...
you know what? No, I can pretty distinctly say that it's intended to be... It's intended to be an organic...
Okay.
An organic progression.
Because it definitely feels like it's all coming from an earned place where these guys have all been through things that are informing their perspectives here.
Yeah, I mean, that was the intention. I mean, we've basically done 5 issues at this point. And so I'd like to think it's earned. I don't know. I mean, I guess that's not really for me to say. But yeah, it's definitely, yeah. Well, I think it kind of speaks for itself there. So
yeah, I love the line from Tommy speaking to Jason. Hey, I didn't see you jumping through any Zords today.
That's true.
Such a deep cut.
There were a bunch of lines. We went round and round on this scene, and there were versions. There was a version in my outline where it turns into a fist fight between Jason and Tommy.
Oh wow!
And it was ultimately decided that was too much. Again, a super fine line, because to me, the point of the scene is, well, first of all, from a plot perspective, the crystal charges on green chaos energy. We've established that. And they save the day before the crystal can become fully charged.
Yep.
So the idea of a breakdown in the relationship between Tommy and Jason, or Tommy and the rest of the Rangers, like depending on your point of view there, is pretty tragic.
Absolutely.
And the idea that then supercharges the crystal, or adds the remaining element of charge that it needed, is even more kind of tragic. And I think that there's no worse chaos than chaos within family, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
That's actually probably not true, but
I mean, there's like war and stuff, but
but for this, for the case of this, like that, in my mind, that was where I was coming from with it. And so it was a conversation about like, well, how far can we push it? Because I need there to be, it needs to feel earned, and also like we've been building to this, and it also needs to feel like it was sufficient enough or significant enough that the crystal would draw charge. And so it then kind of morphed into what it is now. There were other versions at one point. I cut out my favorite line, which was I think Zach says, "Hey, it only stings if it's true," or something like that. And Tommy goes, "Oh yeah, well, what about what about your lapdog routine? And he says, Jason calls and you go bark, bark.
Oh.
And it did, and then there were some lines after that called into question leadership and things like that. And it just became a little too much.
Yeah.
And so I couldn't keep I love the idea of calling someone a lapdog and the response with bark, bark.
Yeah.
But I just couldn't find a way to make it work in any sort of kind of tasteful way. So to the cutting room it went.
I mean, I think the version that we end up with here, where it doesn't quite get to a fist fight, but clearly, if something hadn't happened immediately, Tommy's like mid-punch or preparing a punch. And like, we get across that they're at that level without the fight actually needing to happen.
Yeah.
And then shit gets real quick.
Yeah.
So there's a green tear in, I guess, the fabric of reality. And then a shot that I love of them warping on their helmets, I guess, that's got a semi-transparent. And God, that's cool. And then the command center blows up.
It does blow up.
It blows up.
I have to really just take a point to call out what a great explosion panel that is at the bottom of that page.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
It's just-
Yeah, they killed it.
It looks so violent. It's not a Power Rangers TV explosion where it's some fireworks. There's real impact to it. And then you see the smoking crater of the command center. I imagine that this must have been one you had to fight a little bit for with people in general.
This... I'm trying to remember the genesis of this one. This was the point at a certain... Okay, so early on, when we were outlining, I have to give a ton of credit to my editors at Boom, Daphne and Alex. And Daphne will go to the mat on stuff for me. All like anything we want to do, like Daphne will fight for, right? Yeah. If she's into it. That's not always the case, by the way. Like I've worked with some amazing editors, and I've worked with some editors that they just want to keep their heads low and not get yelled at by the higher ups. Yep. And Daphne and I are talking, and by the way, I totally understand. I totally understand that too. Like you have to look out for your job and for yourself and your livelihood. It's tricky, Yeah. But luckily, Daphne really wants to push the envelope on stuff. And I do too. And so very early on, I had written an outline for the arc, and I don't think I brought the Black Dragon in at the end of issue 4 like this, but the command center wasn't a part of it. Mm-hmm. I don't remember. Sorry, I'm trying to think now.
That's right.
But basically, I remember having a conversation. Oh, that's what it was. I wanted to blow up the command center at like issue 9. And Daphne came back and she's like, you should blow it up at 4.
Just blow it up on first panel, first page. Just
I was like, where do we go from there? She goes, exactly. I was like, okay. So you want me to basically supercharge the arc and get there faster. And it was the only time that there was any sort of there's been any sort of mandate. Mm-hmm. And I wouldn't even say it was a mandate, because if I had really felt strongly that we shouldn't do it, or that it wasn't right for, it wasn't what was best for the story, I probably could have convinced her, like, let's hold off. Yeah. But I kind of took it as a challenge to say, like I knew she was right structurally, especially the way the story breaks for the trade paperback. Like, this is the kind of cliffhanger that you want at the end of your first trade paperback / first arc. So it became a question of like, well, how do we get there in an organic way? And originally the thinking was, we're not the show, and we can do things and push things further, like blowing up the command center, like we can do that. We can like wipe out the command center. And I was like, they're going to let us do that. And she's like, yeah, I got them on board for it. And then as we kind of progressed in the story, it became like walking it back a little bit more and more, where it was like, can we just like punch a hole in the ceiling of the command center? First it was like, can we knock down some walls? Can we just punch a hole in the ceiling? I was like, what are, like, if we're going to do it, we need to do it, you know?
Yeah.
So I think we settled on the idea of like blowing out like half the command center.
Yeah.
But I pushed really hard about like destroying Zordon's tube and like, you know, kind of getting rid of Alpha. Mm-hmm. And I think the idea is that the command center it just needed to look like the command center could be rebuilt, but also it calls into question, like, if it were totally wiped out, like, how do their powers still work, you know?
Yeah, absolutely.
And things like that. So it became like a really healthy compromise, where the impact, like, you look at that page and you go, oh, wow, no, that's a game changer.
Yeah, they're not going to be able to use anything there anytime soon.
Yeah, without it being me, you know, like, setting it all on fire and, like, urinating on the ashes, you know?
Absolutely.
So that's kind of where it came from.
Yeah.
So before we get to the new bad guy, I just wanted to talk like ramifications of this explosion. We know the Rangers are okay because we see them all kind of present, but we don't see Zordon, we don't see Alpha, and we don't see Scorpina.
Also correct.
So do you know, I mean, I imagine that you know what's happened to all of them?
Well, I've already read through issue 8, so I better.
Okay.
No, I know what happens to all of them. Some of them will pay off, or you'll get answers to sooner than others.
Mm-hmm. Okay. It's exciting.
What I like is there's a line here where Tommy at first thinks it's a hallucination, and then he has to be told, no, that's not the case. And I like that. That's a Daphne idea. Right.
That was like, we had all the pieces were kind of there, like with Trini and everything from issue 3, and certainly Tommy hallucinated losing control of the Dragon Zord in issue 3, and then he lost control of the Dragon Zord. And the Dragon Zord, like, destroying Alpha also in issue 3 was a hallucination. So for him to go, that was her idea, to bring them back together, where she's like, it would be very easy, based on what we've shown to the readers so far, for Tommy to go, like, this can't be real. Like, I was wrong. I didn't get over the hallucinations. And it was a super smart idea.
Yeah, it's a depressing moment, because it, like, him not actually conquering Rita and having hallucinations again would be bad, but in this case it would actually be the better scenario.
Yeah, it would.
And to have that, it really hits you again immediately after the command center blows up.
Good.
And then we see the Black Dragon appear on the horizon, and it's sort of looming ahead, and naturally their first instinct is to call out the Zords, but then it shrinks down to approximately human size, I guess. And I guess they've realized that they're dealing with something that's a bit different to what they're used to.
Yeah.
And then that's it.
That is it, yeah.
It's quite a cliffhanger for the end of the first act.
So because you're a monster, we don't get any answers next month. Next month is a different, like, flashback issue. And we're going to have to wait 2 months before we see what is going on.
Correct.
Yeah.
But I don't, like, there shouldn't be any more, at least for the next couple issues, there should not be any more delays in the publishing schedule, because we're giving issue 5, we gave to Tony, and structured it the way we did. Mm-hmm. So it won't be, like, there were a couple issues here that got pushed back a few times, just because it was important to us that Hendry draw everything.
Absolutely.
And not bring in a second artist, you know. But that meant, because we had burned a lot of lead time getting this thing up and running, and the approvals process and everything, it meant something had to give, you know. So it's 2 months, but it'll only feel like 2 months as opposed to 3.
I have a bunch of questions about, like, creating a new villain for Power Rangers and what's going
Yeah.
on there. But I feel like we should save them until we know a little more, because I
Well,
imagine
you
a
can-
lot of the
you can-
answers would be...
You can ask anything, and if I can answer it, I will. And if I can't, I will say that.
Okay, so I'm a designer. So my core question is, how much, with a significant villain like this, as opposed to the shark monsters that are like appearing in a couple of pages,
Right.
how strong are you on like, this is what it looks like, and how much is, but other than that, you can go nuts?
There was a lot. I was pretty involved on this one. A lot of like a lot of the references that I pulled and influences came from like the black stag creature from Hannibal was something that I pulled, and we didn't end up going there ultimately. I'm just kind of now realizing that, like in the coloring, like we definitely went more of a kind of like silver metallic as opposed to like an organic like black kind of liquidy kind of thing. But that was the starting point. And there are some other things about this character, that the Black Dragon, that I can't talk about too much yet, but down the line, when you start to learn certain things about him, I think you'll understand some of the aesthetic choices in the design.
Okay.
That's something to look forward to.
And whose call is the terrifyingly creepy speech bubble with the thick black outline and the wobbly text?
So that was, I don't know if that was in I mean, that's Ed, the letterer. Like, he's actually doing the effect and the design for the effect.
Yep.
I know I called out that we wanted to do something different with him. But yeah, that was probably an Ed/Daphne conversation to really nail down what that look is going to be.
Yeah, well, I think we should probably leave it there, because
Yeah.
I'm going to be too tempted to ask things about.
I don't want to know anymore.
Yeah. So yeah, that's the end of that issue, and then next month we'll be taking a quick jaunt back in time to find out something about the Power Rangers past, which will be exciting.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, and that's pretty much it. Did you have anything else you wanted to say about issue before we close it up?
No, I think that's I think that's about it. Quick shout out to Jamal, who did the killer cover for issue 4.
Right, it's great. Isn't it?
Yeah, it's one of my favorites.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think I would say that if you are intrigued / if you dug what we've been doing the first couple issues, definitely stick around, and I think you'll start to see us separate and differentiate ourselves from the show in bigger and bigger ways.
Yeah.
So, I think we've got some pretty cool stuff in store.
I think this is a pretty good time to remind people as well that you can subscribe to series on Comixology and at your local comic book shop. It's very easy in both ways. If it's at your comic shop, you just go up and say, look, can I please subscribe to this series? And I'll make sure you get an issue every time. So I would highly recommend doing that.
I do have one other thing to talk about quickly that was announced since we recorded last, Kyle.
Sure.
The Power Rangers 2016 annual.
Oh, yeah.
So that's 40 pages, which is twice as big as a normal issue.
Right.
But it's not all you, is that correct? It's a bunch of work from some other people as well?
Unfortunately, yeah.
Those other people.
Other people. No, it's kind of a showcase book for a variety of different short stories, and it's really like it's a collection of I think 6 to 8 page stories. And originally I wasn't gonna be a part of it at all, and I actually lobbied them to let me do something for it. Because my artist from my image book, Cowl, Rod Reese, who's also doing my new image book, Hadrian's Wall. He wanted to do something else, like something actiony, you know. And he's not an artist he's not yet able to really kind of get attention or get hired at DC for a variety of reasons. Like, first and foremost, he was a colorist at DC for like 10 years, so they only really think of him as a colorist.
Right.
So he's not going to get kind of superhero work that way. And also, you know, for as much as Cowl was about superheroes, it was not a lot about superhero action. So I you know, and Hadrian's Wall is kind of a private investigator in space book. So there's a lot of really cool atmospheres and stuff, but not like a lot of big action. And Rod's actually a big martial artist. And so I was like, dude, Power Rangers. And he's like, I'm like 38 years old, 39 years old in Brazil. I live in Brazil. Like, I don't know. I wasn't a Power Rangers fan, but he looked it up and he's like, this could be so much fun. So he actually drew some sample Power Ranger pages, and I got him to Daphne and Alex, and I was like, he'll paint, like, let us do something. Like, he'll paint the whole thing.
Yeah.
And so they found a spot for us. And so Rod and I are doing a 6-page story in the annual that is very different. That's kind of all I can say. I want to tell you what it is because it's really cool. But I'll abstain and just say that, yeah, it's very different. And it focuses on Jason. That's what I'll say.
Is it outside the continuity of the main series? Maybe, that's fine. You can leave that one open.
I mean, yeah, I think that it's a small enough thing that it could go either way. Like, I would say, like, I actually said this to Boom like a few weeks ago. I was like, well, if I'm going to do something, or if we're going to do something, you know, just the kind of colloquial we in comics, like, it should all kind of be connected, you know. Like, I don't know. I think that's a little weird if, like, we're doing comics that aren't connected, like, continuity wise with other comics. You know, it's one thing to do our own thing from the show and say, like, hey, this is not connected to the show, it's our own thing. It's another thing to say, like, hey, our comics are not connected to our other comics, you know. But at the same time, like, fucking Marvel and DC have been doing that for forever. So I might be overthinking it. But in the case of this little short, I think it could definitely be viewed as connected to my main book.
Okay. Well, that's out in August.
Yep.
So that'll be out with, I guess, issue 6 around about the same time.
Yeah, because 5 is in July, and then 6 is August.
Yeah.
Well, that's exciting.
That'll be a big month.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's cool.
And then the trade will be out in,
is that September?
August or September, somewhere in there. I thought they solicited it for August, but maybe it's not. Maybe it's later.
Do you know if that'll include issue 5, or will that be in the next trade?
It will not include issue 5. No.
Right. Got it. So
It'll be 0 through 4.
Sure. That makes sense.
Have you done anything? Is there anything special in it, or will it just be kind of a straightforward collection?
I think the trade will be a straightforward collection, but I don't have any insider knowledge on this, but I would not be surprised if they do, like, big hardcovers eventually of, like, you know, like the first year or
That's what I'm
or
holding
something
out for.
like that.
I'm a big hardcovers guy. That's
Me too.
Yeah.
My dream would be, I've actually never had my stuff collected in a hardcover that was just me.
Right.
Ever. Like, for whatever reason, when I was at DC, like, Gates of Gotham didn't get a hardcover, even though, you know, it was a Scott Snyder. Technically, it was a Scott Snyder book because Scott's name is on it,
and it's great.
Thank you very much. I wrote it, but it for whatever reason they didn't put it in hardcover. But it was also like right at the time. It was right before or right as Scott was starting to get big.
Yeah.
He was doing detective, but it came out before his Batman New 52 run had really started, and so that didn't get a hardcover. And then every book in the Bat Office got hardcovers except for Nightwing for whatever reason.
Oh man.
And it's brutal because the Nightwing trade it's like in its 5th or 6th printing now. Like I get royalties on that like every 3 months. I get royalties on that book.
Wow.
Still.
Yeah.
And they, for whatever reason, didn't. And I think that somebody said to me at one point, they're like, "Yeah, we should have done a hardcover for it." But yeah, so I've had like one shots and stuff put into hardcovers, like part of like I don't think Batman Eternal has anything in hardcover, but that Joker or not Joker, the Death of the Family stuff and Night of the Owls, like those hardcovers have like some of my stuff in them.
Yeah.
But I've never had like a story arc in hardcover, so that would be fucking amazing. But the big one for me would be like if they ever decide to do like an absolute edition kind of thing.
Yeah.
Would be so cool. Like, and again, I have like no insider information on any of that stuff, but like that would be sick. That would be like
Yeah.
I'm absolutely with you there.
Yeah. I'm happy to like send Boo my money now if that helps.
Yeah, I mean, that, and I think like I would lobby for a Gates of Gotham hardcover. It's obviously not like long enough for an absolute edition, and I feel like it was just a victim of the timing of the New 52 happening right afterwards, because it kind of felt like it could have launched so many of those characters back into big things. And
yeah.
Guys, let's not end this on a depressing note.
Well, it was a thing that happened in large part for good reasons because of the New 52. Like, I don't think it would be what it was if it weren't for the New 52, because we flew totally under the radar. No one knew what we were doing. No one cared.
Yep.
And the editor on it just trusted me to tell a good story. It was supposed to be 6 issues.
Oh, okay.
And they cut an issue because of the New 52, because of the relaunch. And then they double shipped issues 4 and 5, which meant there was no way Trevor could draw all 5 issues.
Yeah.
And because while I was writing issue 3, they gave me the main Nightwing book, which was in the 11th hour. They gave it to me like 5 or 6 days before they announced the New 52. Like, I got it really late. Because I got on the Nightwing book so late, it meant I really needed help to finish Gates of Gotham, even though it was a mini, because I was brand new to writing comics full time.
Yep.
And I had never written an ongoing series, and all of a sudden I was writing 2 of them. I was writing Deathstroke and Nightwing, and I was writing Gates of Gotham, and I was writing a miniseries at Marvel, Supreme Power.
Yeah.
And so the editor was like, you got to bring someone else on to help you with this.
Yep.
So one of my best friends, Ryan Parrott, who is an incredibly talented writer. He is like probably the best writer I know, like through and through. He came on and helped me script issues 3 through 5 of Gates. And so it was a weird thing that, like, yeah, if the New 52 hadn't happened, Trevor would have been able to draw the whole thing. We would have had one more issue, so the plotting wouldn't have become as condensed as it did starting in issue 3.
Yep.
But on the flip side, there would have been more attention paid to it, which means that we probably would have had to vet more stuff, and there would have been way more notes.
Yeah.
Way more notes.
That makes sense.
So it ended up. It's kind of a blessing and curse in that way, you know.
Yeah, and I think it's so interesting because it was about the history of Gotham, And there was so much world building in it immediately before the whole world got changed, like the day after.
Yeah.
But it might be back now, maybe. I don't know. I'm not entirely across that.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know what? I don't know. I haven't done anything for DC in quite a while. So I actually have no idea what's going on. I've read a couple of the Rebirth issues that I liked. I really, really liked James Tynan's Detective Comics.
Yeah, it's interesting,
Rebirth.
right? I'm really enjoying that.
It's the best thing James has written.
Yeah.
You know, I think it's great, and it's Eddie Barrows, who I worked with for a long time on Nightwing. It's just like totally in his element, and he's trying different things with different rendering styles.
Yep.
And it's just a great pairing. It really is.
Absolutely.
So I'm really excited for them.
Yeah.
But
did you read Green Arrow, perchance?
Yeah, I started it. I really like the art.
Yeah.
But I don't remember enough of it to talk story wise. Like I don't think I actually finished it, and that's not as any sort of knock to the book. It was like one of the last things I picked up. Yeah, and I didn't get through it.
Yeah. Cool. All right. Well,
We should mention one other comic while we're in the Boom Room.
Sure.
MMPR Pink,
Yes.
also from Boom.
he's out.
Yeah,
The first issue, have you read it, Kyle?
I did read the first issue.
Are you reading that as a fan? You have no particular involvement with it?
I have absolutely zero involvement.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed it, and we haven't had the chance to talk about it on the podcast yet.
Yeah.
I liked it a lot as well. They made some really interesting choices, and I think that, for example, every time I've talked to Brendan or even to Daphne and Alex, it was like, the miniseries is in the TV continuity. It's not tied to what we're doing. Like it's its own. It's part of the TV continuity. And then I picked it up, and they're using cell phones and stuff.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, well, wait, is it modern day? Oh, it is. Okay. Well, so is it part of our... I think that's one of those instances where I say, like, it's kind of confusing if it's a comic in modern day, but not tied to our continuity, you know?
Absolutely.
So I don't know. I mean, maybe it is. That's something I got to talk to them about and figure out. It could very easily be tied to our continuity. Like, I don't have a problem with that. Like, I think there's some really interesting aspects about it.
You just have to send Kim to a gymnastics conference at some point.
Exactly. Which, I mean, do you guys read issue 4? Like, I think I could do that.
Yeah. It wouldn't be the most shocking thing to happen at this point.
Yeah. But what did you guys think about it?
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. Really dug it. I think Daniel Di Nicuolo's art is just... Oh, there's some phenomenal stuff in that.
He's so good.
So good.
I had never seen his stuff before, and it is very, very good.
Yeah.
I mean, the guys at Boom are killing it when it comes to finding artists. I don't know how much, like, did they assign Hendry? Assign such a bad word, but did they pair you up with Hendry? Or did you?
Yeah. No, I had no. It's weird. It's the only book I've done where I had no say in the artist. Although, wait, hold on a sec. Actually, that's not true. Actually, pretty much every. Let me 180 that. Pretty much every book I've done at Marvel and DC, I had no say in the artist.
Yep.
I would have a conversation about it, and like on Batman Beyond, my editor Alex presented a bunch of artists to me, and we would talk about it, and we ended up. I actually had a lot of say on Batman Beyond. On portions of Nightwing, I had say. But anyway, yeah. So with Hendry, it was like, hey, no, this is who we're hiring, and his stuff is great, Like I was like, where'd you find this guy? I don't know his stuff at all. But that's kind of Boom's thing. Like they find and develop new artists or artists that have done some mainstream work before, but maybe aren't doing a lot of it anymore. And Hendry had drawn some, I believe he drew some Power Girl stuff for DC, So they found him, and they found a colorist for him, and we had some conversations about coloring and whatnot, but but they're so good at what they do, boom, that it's kind of like, it's actually really nice, to be honest, for me, like, because all the other books I do primarily, although I am doing some more work for hire stuff now, but like for the most part, all the other books I've been doing are creator owned, which means I have to do everything, you know, and I have to decide on everything. And that's great. I love it, but it's, you know, it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work. Yeah.
Absolutely. Okay, cool. Well, I think that's probably a good place to end it. It's been another mammoth boom room, which I always enjoy.
It's a big room.
It's a big, well,
you're gonna have to do an add-on to the room.
Yeah, we'll do some renovations. I think we can knock down a wall or two.
No, that one's load bearing, but we do the other one.
Okay, yeah, we've got to make sure to take down anything structural. Yeah. Thank you once again for joining us, Kyle, and we will see you next month for another boom room.
Yeah, sounds good.